welcome to Everybody Eats, a Washington Wizards podcast on the Blue Wire Network. My name is Varun Shankar. I'm the Wizards reporter for the Washington Post. So this week's show is coming out a little later, and it's probably going to be a little shorter than usual. It was supposed to be me and Bijan Todd of Monumental Sports going through some early season trends about the Wizards and saying if they were real or not. Technical difficulties totally derailed that, so instead I'm going to be doing my first solo show. Before that, if you like the show, please leave a like, rate, review, and subscribe based on where you watch or listen. It's a huge help for the show. Cannot thank you enough if you've been able to do so. I'm recording Thursday. I was at the Rockets game yesterday, and I found myself going back and forth about how to talk about this team. It's hard with a tanking team, right? The Wizards have lost 10 straight games, and if their goal right now, and I think one of the main goals they have this season, is to keep that lottery-protected first-round pick that is owed to the New York Knicks unless it finishes in the top 8 of the draft, they are doing a fantastic job. They are, I think, 1-11, worst in the league. They are 28th in offense and 28th in defensive rating per cleaning the glass. I don't care as much about the offense. To me, that's a function of pure talent. The Wizards have a lot of players right now who are overextended in the roles that they are currently playing in, and if the Wizards ever become the caliber of team that they want to become down the line, these players will not have as big of a offensive role as they do right now. I'm looking at players like Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr in particular, who are being asked to do a lot more than they were last year, and probably a lot more than they will be if this team becomes competitive. But defense is an area where the Wizards want to hang their hat. They have talked about this again and again, wanting to be a defensive-led team. They have drafted, in a lot of ways, especially early on in the Will Dawkins, Michael Winger era, for defense first. You look at a guy like Bilal Coulibaly. You look at a guy like Sarr, obviously. You look at the organizational DNA that's been brought over. The Thunder have built their team around defense, and it won them an NBA championship last year, even as their offense struggled at times during the playoffs. So defense in a lot of ways has a lot to do with talent. There's athleticism involved, there's natural ball skills involved, but it's in a lot of ways it's also about effort, it's about culture, and it's about coaching. And so the Wizards being 28th right now is a little lower than I thought they'd be so far this year. Also concerning to me about the Wizards, their average margin of victory is negative 16.17 points. So basically that means, on average, they are losing games. They're losing their games by 16.17 points. That is the worst mark in NBA history. It is worth acknowledging. The Wizards were here early on last season, and they got better as the season went along. They did not finish with the worst mark all time. I don't think they will this season, but it shows you how bad the start to this year has been. They've lost 5 games already this season by at least 20 points. That's the most in the NBA. And when we look at the defense in particular, one thing that stands out is that there's a lack of identity right now on that end. I think Washington entered this year wanting to force turnovers. It was a topic of conversation from Coach Brian Keefe in the preseason, and I remember that during training camp, there was one day where the TVs in the practice facility on the court had "our ball" written on it. And this is, the kind of coach speak that you hear every year, but it showed that the Wizards wanted to get to every loose ball. They wanted to get deflections. They wanted to force turnovers and be an active, handsy defense. That has not happened to date. The Wizards are 30th in the NBA in opponent turnover percentage, and, there's only 30 teams in the NBA, so that means they're the worst. They are 5th worst in deflections, which NBA.com tracks. That's actually an improvement from where they were recently. I think they were 2nd worst about a week ago, and so there's been modest improvements in that area of late. And that has been an interesting stat to track, because if you look at the effective field goal percentage of teams shooting against the Wizards, it actually hasn't been that bad. Opposing teams are about 20th in the NBA in terms of how well they're shooting against the Wizards. The location effective field goal percentage, which is basically what if a league average shooter was taking the shots that you're allowing as a defense, is around the same. The Wizards allow a decent number of shots at the rim. They do allow a lot of mid-range shots, and they have done well to not allow threes. They're funneling a lot of shots inside to Sarr, who, if there's any kind of identity defensively for this Wizards team right now, it's all centered along Sarr, who has really emerged as an elite rim protector for the Wizards this season, and he has faced so many shots. He has had such a difficult job as a rim protector this season because the perimeter defense has been pretty bad. The Wizards' biggest issues on defense have often come in transition. They're defending in transition at the 4th highest rate in the league, and when they're in such situations, they are allowing the 4th most points per play. Most of the time, this is happening because they're turning the ball over, which is a problem for young teams. Here's my question after all of that and a lot of bad indicators for the Wizards so far this year. Does any of that matter if Keyshawn George and Alex Sarr keep up the seasons they've been having? Let's start with Keyshawn, who's averaging 15.8 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 2 stocks, and is shooting 50% from the field and 44.1 on threes. He has had massive jumps in usage, massive jumps in efficiency, and massive jumps in playmaking. He has been one of the contributors to the team's turnover problems. Again, I think that's about him being a little bit overextended in the role he's playing right now. He's basically the team's de facto point guard for a lot of the time that he's out there. He's initiating the offense. He's running a lot of pick and rolls, and he has been very ambitious with his passes and sometimes a little too ambitious. And I think in a problem that you see with a lot of point forwards, you could see that even though his dribble has improved, it could still get a little muddy inside. But if you look at his shot profile, he's taking a few more shots at the rim, he's taking a lot of mid-range shots, and he's taking a decent amount of threes. A year ago, most of his shots came off assists. That is, other players were creating the shots for him. This year, it's a lot of self-creation. This goes back to him playing with the ball a lot more this year. He is creating for himself, and he's creating for others, and doing so pretty well. Let's talk about his percentage at the rim, right? Last year, and Keyshawn admitted this himself, when he got inside, he didn't really know what he was doing as he got to the rim. It was, I think this is a function of just going against NBA athletes where you are going against longer players, you are going against more athletic players, faster players, smarter players, and so windows are opening and windows are closing, and you're getting bumped a lot more than you were in college, and maybe you're not getting the foul calls because you're a rookie, and before you know it, the ball's got it stripped from you and it's going the other way, and you're just like, what is happening? He made a lot of work. He put in a lot of work this offseason trying to make sure that when he got inside, he was either going to get a shot at the rim or create a shot for someone else. He went from the 18th percentile in his shooting percentage at the rim among wings to the 79th percentile so far this season. Now, it's early. Who knows how well that's going to maintain as the season goes on, but it looks pretty efficient. I mean, you think about that Rockets game. There's a lot of plays where he's going inside, he's absorbing a bump, and he's doing really well to create angles for himself to finish at the rim against a pretty good rim defender in Varun Shankar. And you see that again and again. His bump has been so good, and you can see that he's 22 years old, and he is a little bit older than the average second-year player, but he's still young compared to the average NBA player, and his body looks so much more developed than I did last year. He's added so much strength. He talked about he's put a lot of time in to the weight room, and so you're seeing his ability inside flourishing because of that. Let's see how it goes as the year goes along, but that's a very encouraging sign. Let's talk about Sarr, who's averaging 19.1 points per game, 8.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists. He's got 2.6 turnovers per game, but he's averaging 2.3 blocks. He's shooting 53.1% from the field and about 35.1% from three. Biggest thing for me with Sarr, he has gone from someone who blocked a lot of shots as a rookie and maybe didn't show the overall underlying defensive impact that you would like to see to someone who's blocking a lot of shots and has that kind of elite rim protection. I mean, we are talking about Sarr as someone who is one of the, I don't want to put a number on it. There's a lot of great players, but I mean, he is someone who maybe not quite at that Chet level rim protector, but I would put him a tier lower in part because he's got such a difficult job because the Wizards' perimeter defense has done him no favors. The gap between him and I think the second highest player in terms of shots faced inside of 6 feet is Evan Mobley, and it's like a 40-shot gap. It's an insane gap between the two. Offensively, the efficiency is still a little below average for a big man, but it's drastically improved from where Sarr was as a rookie. His approach is something that I've written about for the Washington Post and talked about on here a lot. He's attacking the rim a lot more, and he's cut down a lot on his threes from his rookie year. He is taking a lot of mid-range shots. I think sometimes because he's been asked to create so much for the Wizards, you could see him turn to that fadeaway a little bit earlier than you would like. I think that should be a really good counter for him late in the shot clock rather than something that he's going to as a primary answer. But again, these are the growing pains for someone who's still very young. Both of these players look like, and actually with Sar, let's also talk about the passing, because a year ago, he showed flashes of being a really good passer for a big man, operating in the short roll. So that's, he's screening for the ball handler. Two guys go to the ball handler, most of the time Jordan Poole. Sar slips out, and now he's playing basically a 4-on-3, and he did really well to either kick out to a corner or find a cutter. Sar's still doing that a lot this year, but he's also added a lot of great passing chops as someone operating from the top of the key and running Washington's offense and being that kind of hub for the team to run handoffs, pin downs. They're running split actions, and he's done really well to read that out and found cutters. Think about how many times you've seen two guys around Sar or two guys screening for each other, and then Sar hitting one, either coming out to the three-point line or cutting to the hoop. He's done that really well. He's run the plays really well. I think that just as impressive as the assist has been his ability to move from one action to the next and keep the offense flowing. Similar to Keyshawn, I don't think he will be doing this as much if the Wizards become a competitive team, but he's getting a lot of reps in it right now, and I think it's been valuable for him to do so. So both of these guys look like long-term contributors. I don't think either one currently looks like a bona fide star, but they're really young, and at minimum, they look like reliable pieces who should look better as their roles get trimmed down. There's been a lot of chatter about Coach Brian Keefe and his place in all this. I don't think that the Wizards' start to the season reflects particularly well on Keefe, but I do think that the Wizards' front office is overall still very happy with their coach. There's been some in-game mistakes. There's been some, I think the poor defensive performance does lie on Keefe as a head coach. I mean, he talks about it, and he takes responsibility for the team's performance. But I do think that Keefe deserves a large part of credit for Sar and George's growth. If you've been impressed by Sar and George's growth so far this season, you have to be impressed with Keefe. He was brought in a lot of ways because of his ability to help develop players. There is numerous examples of players who cite him as a key factor in their development when he was an assistant coach around the league. Some notable examples: Kevin Durant and SGA. Two different eras of Thunder stars both say that Brian Keefe was a huge part of their development. That's his calling card. And the Wizards players, those two in particular, are developing. The overall results have been bad, but I don't know that they matter that much. And I don't know that they matter to the Wizards that much. Let me explain. There's a lot of minutes still going to CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, a rookie in Trey Johnson, and a really young guard, a second-year player in Bub Carrington. Add to that Bilal Coulibaly hasn't played that much. He's just been in and out with injuries. He missed some games due to a thumb thing. He came back, and then there was a calf injury, so I think he should be coming back from that pretty soon, by the way. I do think the Wizards care about how they do with certain players and certain lineups on the floor. I don't know exactly who that is, but my guess of that is the trio of Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, and Keyshawn George. I'll tell you how they did, but let's take a quick break. All right, so the trio of Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and Keyshawn George has played minimal minutes together so far this season. In that small sample size, I'm going to repeat, small sample size, 119.9 defensive rating per cleating the glass. So the 119.9 number would be the 26th best defense in the league. I'm going to be keeping an eye on how that trio performs together. To me, that's more important than the overall defense. Now, because I'm saying that, does the overall defense, basically where the Wizards finish in defensive rating, hold any merit? If you ask the Wizards, I think they will say, I know they will say, just don't be god-awful. And so far this year, they have been, I would not say god-awful. 28th in the league is not 30th, but they have not been, they have been worse than bad, is how I would say. Now, what really gets interesting is how this looks next year. Because next year, the handcuffs that come with the pick protections, the handcuffs that come with the pick that is owed to the New York Knicks go away. The Wizards, assuming that they don't convey the pick this year, I think they give up a couple second-round picks, and after that, the obligation is over. And so then I think the Wizards view the year after that as, hey, let's see what this young group, which potentially adds a top 3 pick or top 5 pick or whatever to that group, how does that group perform? So I wanted to look at some of the other recent successful or even semi-successful rebuilds that went through the approach the Wizards did, which is a pretty severe teardown and then a building back up through the draft primarily. The teams that I came to are the Thunder, the Rockets, the Magic, the Pistons, and the Cavaliers. And I wanted to look at what did the year before the year where they looked really good look like for these teams? So I looked at the 2021-22 Thunder. They won just 24 games that year, but they were 15th in defense. The 2022-23 Rockets won just 22 games. This is the last year under Steven Silas, and they were 28th in defense, pretty similar to this year's Wizards. The next year, they brought in Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet. They hired Ime Udoka, and they got up to 14th. I think they won like 40 or something, 40-ish games that year. Now, it's important to note because the Wizards will have a lot of cap space, and I've heard some people talk about the Wizards potentially accelerating their timeline, making a similar set of moves to Brooks and VanVleet. I don't expect that to happen right now. I don't expect aggressive moves like that. I do think, like I said, that next year is a let's see how our pieces play together without the handcuffs that we talked about here. So that's that. The 2022-23 Orlando Magic won 34 games. I think this is Jamal Mosley's first year as head coach. They were 15th in defense. The year before that, they won 22 games, 20th in defense. So slightly better than the Wizards. The 23-24 Pistons. So 2 years ago, this is a team that had that ungodly losing streak. They won just 14 games. Obviously, this is a year where I'm pretty sure Cade gets hurt for a lot of the year, and it's a pretty, Monty Williams last year as head coach. They were 26th in defense. A year later, obviously with some personnel improvements, they got up to 14th in defensive rating. And then finally, the 2020-2021 Cavaliers won 22 wins. They were 17th in defensive rating, and then they were in the playoffs a year later. So you look at that, and you can see that you can be a pretty bad team and still not be atrocious in defense. So when we look at the Wizards this year, I think that in an ideal world, they would finish maybe somewhere between 20th and 25th in defensive rating. But if they fall below that, it's not a disaster. It's maybe a little bit disappointing, depending on how they look with that trio of Coulibaly, Sarr, and George on the court, especially if all three of them stay relatively healthy and you get a decent sample size. Next year is really important, though, because I think the Wizards need to show real progress at that point. This year has been undoubtedly bad and needs to improve a decent amount, but it's still early, and I think that it's more about how they play with those long-term pieces than the overall stats. I still think the most important things about this team right now is that you look at Keyshawn George and you look at Alex Sarr and you say, oh, those are dudes. Those are guys that if this team becomes a competitive team a few years from now, you could be pretty confident that they are part of it. I think the same goes. I'm a little less confident about this, but with Trey Johnson, he's looked really good too. I really want to see what Bilal Coulibaly looks like. I thought the early returns he showed were really interesting, especially with his aggressiveness as an offensive player and the confidence he seemed to play with compared to what he looked like late last season. Really excited to see what he looks like when he comes back. So we'll see how that looks. A lot of things to care about for the Wizards across the rest of the season. But that's all for this week. Shorter episode. Apologies for the technical difficulties in the late release, but I will be back next week. You can check me out at Varun Shankar on most social platforms and find my work at WashingtonPost.com/sports/Wizards. I just wrote about 2,000 words about Trey Johnson and how he developed his work ethic and his relationship with his father. I spent like 4 months reporting it. It is definitely worth your time. I'll be back next week, probably doing the real or not with early season trends now that we have a little bit more sample size and hopefully less technical difficulties. If you like the show, please like, rate, subscribe, or give a 5-star review. I'm going to go unpack my suitcase now. I'll talk to you guys soon.